Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Power Saw Shop. This is part 2 of my timing number series of videos. And again, we could probably do a part 3 to this if you guys have questions, but today's video, I want to talk about timing numbers, ported timing numbers, and give you guys a cheat sheet, a set of parameters. Now, these are not set in stone. There are going to be variances in what you can and can't do. These are safe timing numbers that'll get you porting, and that way you can refer to this video anytime you want and kind of look at what I've written down now. And at the end of the video, I'm going to show you 3 saws that are all 65, 66 cc's. I will tell you the timing numbers on them, and I will tell you how they run and how I broke the rules on all 3 of them. These rules are not set in stone. These are safe rules that'll get you guys building fire-breathing saws that won't have any issues. Okay, I'm going to bring you guys right into the bench. Let's talk about ported timing numbers, and we'll start with a 50cc saw.
She cuts, eh?
Let's start with an 028 Super. Let's have a refresher of the stock timing numbers. I'll just zoom you guys right in here so you can see it. Stock timing on an 028 Super steel is 104 on the exhaust, 128 on the transfers, 146 total opening on the intake. Now, I always do total opening on the intake. You could time it on the way up or the way down. That's just how I've always done it. Okay. So 104, 128, 146 is how I would read that. Okay. So what I've done here is I just wrote notes tonight, made you guys a cheat sheet. Okay. Now, some of these numbers I originally got from the Iron Horse and Kenzie, Bayou Country Power Saws. He used to do the YouTube. But these are hard and fast numbers that you can go by, and you shouldn't get into any trouble. Now, if you time your saw and it's completely different than this, you may be on your own. That may be the time you want to send the Tin Man an email. But these will keep you safe. So, ported timing numbers cheat sheet. And I want you guys to be able to refer to this video anytime that you're porting a saw. And this should, like I said, keep you out of trouble. Okay, 50 cc's, exhaust 102. I wouldn't go any higher than 102 on most 50 cc saws. And again, this is without machine work. I'm talking you're doing a base gasket delete, you're not doing any machine work. I wouldn't go above 102. And the reason for that is most 50 cc saws do not have enough torque to deal with any more than 102. Unless you're doing machine work, but that's another conversation for another day. Intake timing, okay? And again, stock, you're at 146. On a 50cc saw, I would add 2 degrees opening, which is 4 degrees total duration. Well, if you added 4 degrees, 150 or less is what I wrote, okay? Now, that doesn't mean you can't go over 150, but I'd try and keep it around here to start with. And you should be okay. At the end of this video, I'll talk about what happens if you go past these numbers, okay? And I have 3 saws that I'll use as an example. They're 3 saws that I've built where I totally fudge the numbers, and I'll tell you how they actually run, okay? So 50cc, 102, keep your intake 150 or less. You may have a 50cc saw with more intake timing than that stock. Maybe you want to try 2 degrees. You should be safe. Okay, I'm just going to write plus 2 degrees. Okay, 2 degrees is usually safe on all saws. You can raise the exhaust 2 degrees, and you can lower the intake 2 degrees, which will give you 4 degrees more total opening. So if you're at 144 and you add 2 degrees, which is 4 degrees total, you'd be at 148, which would still keep you under 150, okay? So that's 50 cc, not a lot of torque. If you don't have a lot of torque, you don't have a big rotating assembly, you don't have a big piston, you want to keep your exhaust lower to start with. You can always play with it later. Okay, let's talk about 60 cc saws. Same kind of deal. I think a 60 cc saw should be kept at 102 or a lower exhaust roof, 102, 104, somewhere around there, because again, they don't have a lot of torque. Intake timing, 152, okay? You should be safe with that. Now, I have timed saws like that Echo 590. That had 158 degrees total timing. But Echo does some weird timing, I notice. It works for them, but Echo's kind of the oddball. But most saws, somewhere around here should keep you safe, okay? And somewhere around here, you'll still have a torquey, powerful saw. Okay, 65 cc. We're talking your 266s, your 365 specials, that kind of thing. This is where you can bump it up to 100 degrees. Okay, 100 degree exhaust on a 65 cc saw is usually a good balance between speed and torque. If you're sharp and you got a 65 cc saw at 100, you usually got quite a potent little saw in a small light package, hopefully. Now, intake timing. This is where the intake timing starts getting bumped up. 156 is kind of a good number for most 65 cc saws. Your 365s, your 266s, your steels. This is a good place to be. So, again, lots of saws in this displacement. Keep it under 100 and you should be good to go. Okay, next one here. Next one here, 72 cc's. This is where the party starts. 72 cc's are where they have enough torque to get the job done, and you can really play with the exhaust roof. 98 is my personal, I don't go past there on a 72 cc saw. The reason for that is I find without machine work, if you go past 98, 98's even pushing it, but you can build a pretty substantial saw at 98. I've done a few on the channel and they run good, but much past there and you start getting really peaky and you start to lose your torque. So if you're cutting bigger wood and you have a 97 or 96 exhaust roof, they can become lackluster, especially if you're a ham fist and you're not sharp. Okay. Now all of these exhaust roofs and timing numbers, you gotta have a sharp chain and you gotta be a smooth cutter. You will get the most out of your ported saw if you're sharp and you're smooth. Okay. Intake 158. Now you could go 160, but honestly, you're safer at 156, 158, okay? And I'm going to talk about, after we look at all this, why I say that. And some porters kind of argue with me about it, but I mean, this is my experience, and I can explain to it, and I have enough saws here that I've ported at certain numbers. I can kind of tell you how they run, but again, I'm never here to argue. I'm just here to tell you guys what I know. There's different ways to port. All different kinds of timing numbers, but these are safe numbers that I've used for years that you really can't go wrong with. So again, if you're doing a 372, something like that, 158 is about as far as you want to go. 156 is really safe on most saws and it'll run good. You'll still get enough fuel and air. Don't go past 160. It'll still run if you do, but it'll have detriments, and I'll talk about that after. 80 cc, you can lump 77 cc saws into this. 82 cc's, your your 372s, your MS 460s. 98, same as 70cc, 160 intake. Okay, you're safer going to 160 on most 77 to 82cc saws. The bigger saws will just take more fuel, and they'll eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But again, don't start pushing that much past 160 or you will notice it. It might take you a while, but you'll go, wait a minute. And again, I'm going to talk about that at the end. 90cc plus. Well, I haven't ported a ton of big saws, but 96, because again, these have a lot of torque depending on the saw, but once you get into the big boy saws, you can really play with the numbers. 96 is about as far as I would go. 160 plus, you can go 162, 164. But again, play that by ear. If your stock 90cc saw only has 150 degrees of intake timing, you might not want to add 12 degrees of total opening, right? The less intake timing you have to start with, the more you got to think about, well, how much do I actually want to add? If the saw stock is 156, well, if you're only adding 4 degrees, which is 160, you should be good to go. So I hope that makes sense. I'll let you guys look at it one more time. 50cc, keep your exhaust screw flow, less intake timing. They tend to spit back more on the smaller saws because they just can't handle being fed all that fuel and air. It's nowhere to go. The bottle's smaller, so if you're filling a smaller bottle, you only got to turn the tap on for a short period of time. And again, keep your exhaust screw flow because you will lose torque quickly. If you're building a fire-breathing limbing 50cc saw, go ahead, put it at 98. But if you're in the woods and you got a buck a 16-inch hardwood log, you're going to wish you never put it that high. Again, 60cc, keep that exhaust screw flow. You can add a little more intake. 65, 100, 156. More fuel and air in the bigger 65cc saws. One more time, 72, you can go to 98. 158 to 160 is as far as I'd go on a 72cc saw. 80cc, 98, 160, 96, 160 plus. So you kind of notice in your bigger saws, it's like 2 degrees, 2 degrees, 2 degrees. You can kind of add 2 with every displacement jump. Okay, I'm going to show you guys 3 saws that I've built. They're good saws, but they could be better. And the reason why? Well, I ruined these timing number rules. You guys remember the famous, well, maybe not so famous, but the 65cc cutoff. Okay? The 65cc cutoff. These 4 saws were in that cutoff. Now, which saw won? This one, 365 special. Okay? Where are the timing numbers on this saw? My exhaust roof is at 99 on this saw. Now, at 99, it's got thump, but it's not a compression monster. 99 exhaust. My intake is at 156 on this. My blowdown is at 22, okay? So I broke the rules on this on my exhaust roof. It's 1 degree higher than my hard and fast rules. My intake is well within line. I didn't mention blowdown in these numbers because blowdown is all over the place. I don't want you guys grinding on transfers if you're not ready, because you can make a lot of mess grinding on transfers. So, but anyways, this saw is 1 degree higher. How does this saw run? Like a Swiss watch. Starts, idles, tunes beautifully. I rarely have to put a screwdriver on it. It's a super nice saw. It's not overly torquey because the exhaust roof is too high. I built this as a softwood cutter. It's a really fast saw, and it's a nice saw. I love running it, and I've never rebuilt it because I enjoy it. But it idles beautifully, and the reason why, well, it's 156 intake. It's well within the safe zone, and that makes it very zippy on the throttle, easy to tune, and it's not a fuel hog, and it'll idle all day long. I can throw this thing on the ground, and it'll idle for an hour, and I never have to touch it, okay? So, there's that one. This saw was mid-pack in the cutoff. Well, this saw was 68 cc's. It was the biggest saw in the competition. Well, it also had the lowest exhaust roof and good amount of intake timing. But the reason why this saw didn't win is my exhaust roof is really low on this saw. It doesn't have a ton of intake timing, but this saw has little to no piston or transfer work. So although I have all the timing I could ever want in this saw, it doesn't flow enough air to really be a fire breather because I didn't open up the piston windows and I didn't do a ton of lower transfer work. Okay? But again, easy starting, easy tuning, because that saw has like 100 and I think it's got 154 degrees of intake timing. Okay, that leaves these two. You guys have seen these saws. You guys always like when I start this one. Let's see if we can. This saw has tons of compression. I might not even be able to start it. It's too cold. Yep, I don't think this saw is going to go. So, there you go. This one. Oh, it's too cold, friends. Way too cold. Anyhow, well, would have been fun if I could have got this to start, but okay. These two saws, you guys have seen these for years. 630 Super with a 266 top end and a 266 with a 266 top end. Now, I'm going to grab my timing book. What are the numbers on these saws? Because I want to explain to you guys how I come up with these rules and just discuss how these saws run and where I think I went wrong. Okay. This saw here, low compression. It's not a torque monster. It's just a good high speed softwood saw, but doesn't have a ton of torque. Now this will cut hardwood if you're sharp. If you're a gentleman with it, it runs good, but this saw here, 98 exhaust. Again, totally broke my rules. It's a short stroke saw with a 98 exhaust. Transfers, 124. This saw has 26 degrees of blowdown. Intake, 80 or 160 total opening. Okay, how does this saw run? Oh, it cuts, and it cuts at high speed. But it's not the torquiest saw because my exhaust roof is very high, and the saw doesn't idle very good. Never has. The only way I could ever get this saw to idle is to modify the spring in the clutch, cut it shorter basically, to make this clutch engage at a higher RPM so I could actually turn the idle up on this saw. Because this saw is 160 total intake timing, it's kind of like a dragster. It needs a high stall torque converter or it fades away. If you put this saw down, it'll idle for 20 seconds and you can hear it. It slowly fades away and it dies unless you jack up the idle screw. So again, I broke all the rules on this saw. It runs great. It's not the torquiest saw and it doesn't idle very good. Why? 160 degrees of intake timing is a bit much for this saw, even with the small carb on it. This has the original small carburetor. Okay, I've never done anything to this saw though, because it's one of my early builds and it runs okay. So now I may put another top end on it one of these days, but okay. This saw here, I wonder if there's any gas in these saws. There's probably no gas in them, that's why they won't start. Yeah, this thing's empty. Well, that's why it won't start. This saw here, well, better put some gas in here now, because, you know, we're here. Try to stay in the shot here, friends. Here, I'll just put a little sploosh in there. See if we can get her to run. There we go. Okay. I'll get her running. I'll move the camera up here a little bit. Listen to this saw. It sounds like a helicopter. Okay, let's see if we can get this thing going. Not an easy starter. And again, if you're building work saws, the more you mess with them, you make it harder and harder to start. Now it's good. Okay. Anyhow, I'll put you guys back down. You guys hear that thing? You hear it. It's moving air. All kinds of air. Now, that saw was an experiment. Now, I broke every timing rule you can on that saw. Okay, so that saw there is an absolute orangutan. High chain speed, lots of torque. It's nutty. But again, it's not the best idler. You hear how fast it wants to idle? That's because, again, I've modified the clutch. That's a 3-spring clutch on there. I've modified the springs on that thing so that it will idle at a higher RPM because it doesn't idle well. Why? 160 degrees total opening on the intake. My intake is too big. It's open for too long. Also, my exhaust roof on that, 97 degrees. Now, that is way too high for a 66cc saw. But the reason why it runs the way it does and still has gobs of torque is because I did all kinds of machine work to the cylinder and the piston, okay? That has a lightweight single ring piston with I cut the top off of it and cut a pop-up, and the saw runs really good. Combustion chamber stock, there's upper transfer work in that saw. Blowdown is, let's see, 25 degrees. So again, it's another long blowdown, long intake, high exhaust roof build. It cuts circles around this thing. Nothing wrong with this saw, but that one's way stronger. This one actually has a harder time idling than that one. Not sure why, but maybe there's some differences in the cases of a Johnsonred and a 266. But so again, that saw there, if you put it down, it'll idle and then it slowly fades away. It loads up and then it dies. And the reason for that is it's over intake. So you really got to watch your exhaust roof height and your intake. Or you'll end up with a super peaky saw that doesn't have a ton of pull in the cut and it won't idle, which is horrible for, well, cutting wood. I find it funny on the internet, you know, the whole YouTube thing. It's like, to me, these are tools to make firewood or to do tree removals. So my whole way of being, like, race saws are super cool and I get it, but it's like, to me, I'm focused on, it has to start, run, idle, and tune properly. And if it doesn't do any of those things, to me, it's not an effective tool for cutting wood. And these things get me firewood. So that's just my school of thought. And, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but they have to run. And if you fudge your timing numbers too much, guess what? You're going to have a really picky saw. Especially if you're building saws for others, friends. If you diverge out of these safe timing numbers, you can really create a hassle where a guy's constantly, and most tree guys, they're not doing this 10 times a day as the temperature changes or the saw gets hotter. They're not going to do that. And what they're going to end up doing, if the saw doesn't idle, they're going to huck it in the truck and they're going to say this thing's a piece of junk. So at least the guys I know, that's the way they are. So again, hope that helps you. I won't flop anymore. I think this saw here, I may redo it. It's a good saw, but I know I can make it better. Put a 272 top end on it and make it into a real fire breather. And yeah, it looks like a nice clean saw. This thing was an absolute turd when I got it, and I've literally built this out of like 4 saws. The top cover's from one saw, the handle's from a different saw. You know, this nice chain brake. The recoil is from another saw. Really, the only things matching on this saw is the cases, the cylinder, the intake, and the carburetor are the only original parts of the saw, to my recollection. This wrap one of you guys sent me, so it's a part saw. Anyhow, friends, I hope that helps you out. Please refer back to this video anytime you're porting, and have fun. Keep porting fun. It's a hobby and a passion and just a fun pastime for a lot of us. Keep it fun. We're cutting wood with ridiculously loud go fast chainsaws. That's fun. At least it is to me. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Take her easy, and I'll see you guys in a couple days. Later.